To paraphrase one of Barack Obama's favorite phrases, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Now, were Vladimir Putin to offer his own rendition of these words, he would probably have it asked backwards, and it would go along the lines of this: the arc of history is long, but it bends backwards. Um, this at least appeared to be the thrust of the Russian president's message this week, when he offered a rambling and ahistorical speech dismissing Ukraine's right to exist, and then days later he announced that Moscow's intent to invade the country in order to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. In his telling, if Ukraine had once been part of the Soviet sphere, it should be part of Russia. And just as Russia defeated the Nazi regime in Germany, it would do so again, this time in Kyiv. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but Putin is not the only world leader who has harkened back to an ahistorical past to justify his decisions in the present. The right wing nationalists around the world have sought to portray themselves as the primary defenders of a glorious past that their enemies would seek to deny or forget, by whitewashing uncomfortable legacies and seeking to cultivate the politics of historic grievance, and Putin has attempted the same thing. But in his justification for the invasion of Ukraine, Putin's historicism has bordered on what we call delusion. Now, whether the Russian people or the rest of the world share in it, for now, it appears to be immaterial. If there's one audience that this revisionist history is designed for, it's Putin himself. The evolution of Putin's historical revisionism can be seen throughout his public statements over the years. In 2005, he famously described the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. 2 years later, after that, Putin had bemoaned the aftermath of the Soviet era and the pernicious, unipopular world, one that was led not by Moscow but by Washington, that it had created. And last year, and perhaps the clearest articulation of his worldview, Putin had said that Ukrainians and Russians are one people, a single whole. On Monday, he took that sentiment even further, declaring Ukraine to be an inalienable part of our own history, culture, and spiritual space, whose independence was a product not of self-determination, but Ukrainians had resoundingly voted in favor of independence from the Soviet Union in 1991 referendum, but rather he saw it as a mistake. Now, unlike his 2014 address announcing Moscow's annexation of Crimea, which was largely framed as a moment of celebration, this was an angry speech that he put out, one ostensibly. It was basically designed to make Russia's people angry too, and to justify what was to come. In territories adjacent to Russia, we note in the historical land a hostile anti-Russia is taking shape. But Putin said in another address ahead of the invasion, for our country, it's a matter of life and death, and a matter of our historical future as a nation. Now, it's hard to know what Putin means by historical future, which is, on its own pace, a fucking oxymoron, though we can take an educated fucking guess. When Putin speaks of Russia, he speaks of a country whose greatness is defined by its past, namely, the imperial history and its victory during World War II, which he believes must guide its present. Now, Putin weaponized history by giving it a function. Orsia Lutsevich, who's the head of the Ukraine Forum at the London-based the Chatham House think tank, had said, as far as the Russian president is concerned, history is the fortune teller of the future. Such historical narratives can be compelling, especially when they elicit the kind of nostalgic nationalism that has proved potent elsewhere, including in the United States, where Donald Trump's Republican Party has dubbed itself the defender of patriotic education, which it's anything but that. India, where Hindu nationalists have appealed to pride in India's past to undermine its secular present, and Hungary, where Prime Minister Viktor Orban often invokes the territories the country lost after the First World War. And Putin is not the only person who is old enough to have felt that sense of deep, personalized humiliation and shame that came with the loss of the power of the Soviet Union at the end of the Cold War. Now, Keir Giles, who's the author of Moscow Rules and What Drives Russia to Confront the West, had said, anything that reasserts Russia as that great power with a greater status than others, and the right to global presence and global influence in others, the affairs will be popular in those sectors of the Russian population. And still, it's difficult to gauge just how big that sector is or how pervasive the narrative is. And has long been those who don't share Putin's semi-mythological view of history. A recent poll, published the day before the start of Moscow's military invasion of Ukraine, found that though roughly half of the Russians support using military force to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, and only 36% support doing so as a means of forcing a reunification of the two countries. Now, the lack of support for the latter the lack of support for the latter was most clearly evidenced by anti-war protests that had broken out across Russian cities. When somebody spoke with Denis Volkov, who's the director of the Moscow-based Levada Center, the Russia's latest independent pollster in early February, he said that though the majority of Russians fear war, very few would feel comfortable voicing opposition to it if it came due to fear of reprisals. Indeed, more than 1,700 arrests have already been made, and besides, Volkov said, public opinion will be no limit to the Russian government. Though Putin may feel obliged to justify his war of choice to the Russian people, and with Ukrainians and the Ukrainians will share the cost of a bloody and drawn-out conflict, Putin's revisionist history is designed to appeal to no one more so than himself. By restoring Russia's control over its former territories, Putin not only corrects what he sees as a historic wrong, but he also cements his place in Russian history as the leader who restored the country to its rightful status. The irony is that in his quest to make Russia great again, his risks of achieving just the opposite, invading Ukraine, has already resulted in wide-ranging sanctions, and he's all but ensured the Russia's diplomatic isolation. Even Putin's friends in Europe, such as Orban and Czech President Milo Zeman, they have gone out of their way to reiterate their support for Ukraine and their commitment to a joint European Union stance. Now, Putin's views have become more and more extreme over time to the point where they are now more or less unrecognizable, and they have very few points of contact with history as it's understood in the outside world. Giles had said he's operating in a different plane of reality and in a different century. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when the new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can go to the about section on my YouTube channel and donate to Patreon. And with just as little as a few bucks or something like that, you can help the channel go a long way. But yep.